Well, my name's Chris Carswell. Been known as Ewok for about 26 years. Picked that name up the first time I ever walked onto a rafting outpost to try to get a job as a raft guide. And I've been a whitewater raft guide for 26 years. And of course, just mentioned whitewater rafting. That is probably one of my largest passions. Started out as a one summer job, and I guess that one summer has just never ended. And also wildland firefighting, and that helps pay the bills more than anything else does. But I really enjoy that too. I used to work for the state of Tennessee, and the technician that is our county came rafting with us and mentioned that the state season is fall, winter, spring, basically our off rafting season. And it worked out perfectly that I could work as a wildland firefighter in the wintertime and raft guide in the summertime. And then I started taking time off from rafting and going out west and fighting fire during the summertime. And I've built myself up to where I'm an engine boss there now. I'm in charge of a 3-man engine crew. And we do structure protection. We hold roads if fire's burning up to a road, keep it from jumping roads, all kinds of cool stuff like that. My first encounter with moonshine, I was very young. My great uncle made liquor. And then it was really just seeing it in a jar. And I knew that he made liquor, but didn't understand a whole lot about it. Till as I got older, things say, oh, I understand that now. But when I was little and seeing a clear liquid in a jar, why do they got water in a mason jar is kind of probably the way I was thinking. Then as I got older, I understood that he was making liquor, and it was always hush hush. You never say anything about this. And then when I was 13, he got busted for, I think it was his 4th time, and they basically told him then, said, if we ever catch you again, we're going to take everything you own. And he owned a piece of family farm, and he quit, never made liquor again. Then my cousin and I, when we decided we wanted to start making liquor together, we went to him and said, hey, we want to do this, we want some pointers. He goes, boys, there's no such thing as pointers. I won't give you any pointers. He said, if you want to learn, he said, I will teach you. But there's no such thing as pointers. And that started a roller coaster ride that has been something else ever since. Somebody in my family on every generation has made liquor since my family left Ireland. And that was pre-Civil War. I've got a book with recipes written in it to pass on to my children. So they have family recipes, recipes that I've came up with, recipes that were given to me. My grandfather-in-law, my wife's grandfather, got diagnosed. He didn't have very long to live, and actually mailed my wife and I a handwritten copy of his liquor recipe that he had made, and it was written down when he was making liquor. And he hasn't made liquor now in 66, 67 years, but it was a handwritten recipe. And that recipe has been made since I got a hold of it. But it was the first time that recipe was made. My mother-in-law is now 70 years old, and it hadn't been made since she was 3 years old. Passing energy along, I believe. Because even though they have no energy into what you're doing at that moment with setting that mash, lighting a fire under that pot, catching that liquor, but they have energy into why that's done that way. So you're constantly putting their energy back out into the universe, and 100% you're keeping them alive. Thomas Jefferson, David Crockett, virtually anybody that signed the Declaration of Independence, they were rebels. That they stood up against a tyrannical government and said, we've had enough. And I am anti any type of tyranny against anyone. Just everybody should be able to live their life the way they want to live, as long as they're not harming another human being when they're doing it. That's what the founding fathers had intended for this country to be. As long as you're not harming another human being, do whatever you want to do. So there's this gentleman that's gone now. We called him Wooly. You would have thought he was the biggest hillbilly that ever walked the face of the earth. Lived in a bus up in the mountains of Cott County, Tennessee. Wasn't originally from Cott County, but he moved there, bought property there. The man made liquor, lived as he wanted to live. The man had designed parts that were in the space shuttle and got tired of regular life and moved to Cott County, Tennessee, 5 miles back up into the mountains, and did what he wanted to do. Totally changed his life from living in a city and going to an office every day to moving to the mountains, making liquor, and doing what he wanted to do. Probably my biggest one, just because I got to see that. I met him shortly after he moved to Tennessee. Trained one of his sons to be a whitewater raft guide. That's how I got to know him. And, you know, said, screw the real world, I'm going to be me. Probably had lots of influence on the fact that my cousin and I decided to start making liquor too, and talking to him. My wife was like, why don't we try doing a coffee? See if we can get coffee to ferment. So I used dark brown sugar and coffee. It came from a local roaster at home in Cott County, Tennessee, called Snowbird Coffee. And it didn't ferment when I first put it down. I used my traditional yeast that I always use, and it didn't ferment. Acid content was too high for my yeast. So I did a little research. I talked to a couple buddies of mine. They're like, try this yeast. And one of them has a little shop in Newport, Eric Manus, and he said, try this yeast. I got that yeast. It was a very high acid tolerant yeast, and I didn't think it was going to kick off either. It took it a few days, but then when it started, it started. And it took about 2.5 weeks for it to ferment off, which I'm all about. The longer the fermentation, the better product you're going to turn out on the other end. No speed fermentation, slow. And then my cousin Neil, he comes to the house and we're going to run this. He's got a really small 8-gallon pot, and we'd only made about 6 gallons of wash to experiment with. And you know, I'm going to run a thump system and infuse some coffee flavor into it out of the thumper. And he's like, man, you know, traditionally rum is made in a pot still. He goes, let's try it with the pot still. He goes, if the coffee flavor don't come, we'll do another run and try it with a thumper. I'm so glad that we did not use the thumper, that we ran traditional pot still. It's got a very mild underlaying rum flavor. As soon as you open the jar, you think you're getting ready to drink a cup of coffee. As soon as it hits your tongue, you think you're drinking a cup of coffee. The coffee taste is there. I mean, it's a wonderful coffee flavor because I used a really, really good bean that these guys specifically roasted for me to use in a fermentation process. I dig ginseng. I hunt morel mushrooms. Pretty much anything to do. And actually, right before we filmed, my wife was telling me that the folks that rent from my mother-in-law said they've already found 2 morel mushrooms this spring. The ramps ain't even popped the ground yet, and we got morels popping. So I've got to go check that out the next day I have off from work. Caving, crawling around underground. I like the outdoors, period. Pretty much anything I can do, I like to do. Do a little fishing, do a little hunting. Don't do near as much as that as I did when I was younger, but I still like to do it. I like being in the woods and away from it all. Something that I have told all my kids. 1 is never trust the government. 2 is you never let nobody bully you. You never let nobody else bully anybody else. If somebody's being bullied, you take up for them. It don't matter. Look out for your fellow man. I think those are the most important things that there is. Look out for your fellow man, and don't ever let anybody step on you, and don't ever let anybody step on anybody else. Our liquor family, sometimes even all of us don't get along. We may not like each other, but if things go down, usually we're still looking out for each other. The family is tight. There's people talk about a moonshiner's code, and there's no set of rules that this is what the code is. But you look out for each other, and that's what the code is. You look out for each other. If somebody asks you for advice, you don't send them in the wrong direction. You always look out for that person. If they say, hey, I've got this going on, this isn't working for me with this mash, or this has happened when I've run, then you start a conversation with them and they say, well, I did this. And you say, well, maybe you'll try to do this. Maybe turn your fire down under your pot a little bit. My big thing is, like on the threads on Facebook with the newbies coming in and asking for advice, I'll say, my liquor's really hot. All right, turn your heat down. Run it slower. Low, slow, and cold is everything. The slower you run the liquor and the colder you have condensing, whether you're condensing with a worm, a shotgun condenser, whatever, the colder you condense it, the better liquor you're going to produce. I have moonshiners that they're as close to me as blood relative. No ifs, ands, or buts. And then I have moonshine family, they're more like my cousin. And some of them maybe even an estranged cousin. But I have moonshine family that, unquestioned, that I'd lay down my life for. And quite a few of those I think would work the same way with me. People helped me out when I started, so I feel that's reciprocal. That's you're passing on to the next generation of liquor maker, whether it's your kid or it's some person you really don't even know. They say, hey, I'm having a problem with this. If you don't help them, then they keep making the same mistake, and then they're like, okay, I'm done with this. And I almost have a feeling that until very recently, this art form was dying. And I've seen a little uptick in the past few years where there's more people getting into home distillation and making at home. And I'm so happy to see that. Because I think if some of the big legal companies had their way, all of us would be out of business. And I hate to say out of business, all of us would be out of an art. My biological father, had he not got busted running liquor, I probably wouldn't be here. He got busted running liquor, and then he had the choice of going to prison or going to Vietnam. He chose going to Vietnam over going to prison. When he come home from Vietnam, the Special Forces unit he was with was doing maneuvers in the Wilsons Creek Gorge in Burke County, North Carolina, which is where I was born at. My mom just happened to meet him. And they had a fling, and I came out of that. Had he not got busted running liquor, he would have probably never went to Vietnam. And then I wouldn't be here. So my buddy Van got raided 2 summers ago. I happened to be there when it happened. Might have been the coolest cops, maybe, that have ever walked the face of the earth. I don't know. I had literally just put 6 gallons of liquor in the back of the truck and covered it up, and was walking around the front of the truck when they come ripping into the driveway. They're coming in looking for Van. Well, they wind up getting over 50 gallons of liquor. And I'm sitting in the workshop. They ain't even talked to me yet. I'm just waiting for it to, and who are you? And I'm over in Western North Carolina. I need to come back home to Tennessee. And So that cop say, hey, do I have to stay here? He's like, oh no. He goes, you're no part of Mr. Fields' illegal operation. He goes, you can leave. Then I'm super freaking nervous because they've said I can leave. So where he lives at, you come out the end of his road, if you take a right, you're in Georgia in about 3 minutes. Which is not the way I would have went home. So I think to myself, all right, do I try to go home the regular way and take this risk? Or do I drive down in Georgia and add 2 hours to my trip? And I turned right and went into Georgia. Added 2 hours to my trip. But the cops, so there was North Carolina alcohol law enforcement, and there's county cops. Well, the county cops were getting selfies made because Van's famous. They're taking pictures with Van, and so even though he had to put a little bit of money out and he got a little bit of probation time, the cops over there making selfies with the guy they just busted for making liquor. I gotta say that probably fits right in as being the funniest thing. The cops just busted this guy, now they're making selfies with him. The truth of the matter is, I think the majority of your local cops really don't care at all. There's been a few times in my life where I've had a jar taken away from me and never got charged with having untaxed liquor. It's like, we're taking that. Don't let us catch you with it again. That's happened to me a couple times in my life. Of course, if I'd had a couple cases of it, that might have been a different story. But having a single jar, we've had cops show up at raft guide parties because some neighbors somewhere called and said we're being too loud, and there's jars of liquor everywhere, which the river I work on, the Pigeon River, it's in the heart of Cotton County, Tennessee. And those of you that don't know, Cotton County is pretty much world famous for its liquor making. There's an argument over whether Franklin County, Virginia or Cotton County, Tennessee made more liquor during Prohibition than the other. They're probably the 2 biggest counties that turned liquor out during Prohibition. And that's in the entire country. Those 2 places were just pumping liquor. That if there was 10 springs on a mountain, there were 10 stills on that mountain usually.